Latin America has some beef with the U.S., and let me tell you why. At a summit scheduled for next month, Latin American countries will begin a debate about whether or not U.S. military bases should still be operating throughout Latin America. The Summit of the Americas on April 10th and 11th is going to be attended by regional leaders, with 31 nations already confirming attendance. Ernesto Samper, a Colombian politician, suggested that the summit would be a good place to, quote, reassess relations between the U.S. and South America. Samper also criticized Washington's habit of taking what he calls unilateral steps to pursue its goals in Latin America. One could see the latest U.S. declaration of Venezuela as a threat to its national security as the most recent example of that. Many people would agree, like the former Colombian president. Jose, how do you feel about this?
I mean, this is not something new. This anti-U.S. sentiment, it's been in the south part of the continent for a long, long time. And now with the U.S.-Cuba relationship getting closer, but at the same time the Venezuelan-U.S. relationship is straining away, it's natural for Venezuela and the influence that it has with the other countries in the area to start talking about this removal of bases, which not necessarily is a bad idea in itself, because I don't see any possible threat coming out of Latin America or any threat of the Middle East antagonists to come through Latin America, and so they have military bases to defend themselves. But the reality is that most of those operations were set in the time of the Cold War, and now we're not in the same situation. So that makes sense that these countries are saying, you know what, maybe we don't need US bases here.
Right.
Why would they?
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. I mean, we still have military bases all over, obviously more than any other country. But yeah, and a lot of them are left over from times when it was necessary, but now it's just kind of like, well, we just keep doing it because that's our sphere of influence. We're going to keep it that way. And then when things like these Venezuela sanctions and the Venezuela things start heating up, they're kind of reminded of these things, and they're kind of saying, well, you know what? Yeah, you should get the hell out. We don't really need you. Mr. Sempre, he also mentioned this. He said, no country has the right, referring to the U.S., no country has the right to judge the conduct of another, and even less to impose sanctions and penalties on their own. So it's like, it says a lot. I mean, this whole Cuba relations, they also don't want that to overshadow what's going on. They're kind of saying, okay, fine, you're warming up to Cuba, but we're not going to forget about what you guys are doing in Venezuela and how you're mistreating people and you're unilaterally making decisions and trying to influence other countries where you really shouldn't be sticking your nose in at all.
I mean, yes, but that's a modus operandi. The U.S. has an influence in all the continent. The U.S. has very close tabs on the development of these countries. That's why they have military bases on these places. At the same time, if you have been watching the LEAP, you know that we've been talking about the relationships of Iran with the rest of Latin America. So now that the Iran talks for the nuclear curbing are not moving as fast as they would like to, it makes sense for the U.S. to want to keep those bases there, knowing that Iran has a strong influence in the continent, for that being one of many, many reasons why the U.S. wants to be present in Latin America. We have the cases of Colombia when the drug trafficking was a really, really big problem in the area. The U.S. went and provided support, but also opened up some military bases down there. And they haven't done it in Mexico, but they're sure trying hard to open one in Mexico. I don't know when that's going to happen. But my point is that this attitude, it's been repelled by Latin Americans for a long, long time, where we see that they're trying to explore the idea of establishing permanent posts in these territories, and that won't jive.
Imperialistas, huh?
Gringos.
Well, one big thing to mention here is that Cuba's attending for the first time since 1962. That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
Prior to this, the U.S. and Canada didn't let them do it. They were completely against it. It pissed off Nicaragua and Ecuador, who said, fine, then we're boycotting, we're not going. So that's a little bit of good news coming from all this. Other than that, it doesn't seem to be going so well as far as the relations go with the whole continent of South America and the U.S. For obvious reasons, for a lot of different reasons, but most obvious, I think, the Venezuela whole sanctions and all that, which is heating it up, right?
The economic disparity
for sure.
of the continent compared to the United States. I think that's a big, big issue where the perception in the continent is that the most of the wealth is accumulated in the north and the problems are exported to the south. and they profit from the problems that the South is experiencing.
Exactly.
So it's a complex situation where definitely I don't see the need for military posts in Latin America in the benefit of the United States.
And I would go as far as to say anywhere where it's just not necessary. I don't know. You guys let us know what you guys think. Of course, we'd love to hear what you have to say about all of this. Is America just putting military bases where they really don't need them, or are these countries just pissed off? Let us know what you guys think by commenting, and of course, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the Lip TV for more.